Okay, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the final part of our role manging for the Masks of Nyarlathotep campaign. Yes, it is the final part. I know that may be of some disappointment to some of you. I mean, the campaign has been great. And I didn't, well, I mean, perhaps I should just talk about the session first. We'll do that. We'll talk about the ending later. Let's just talk about the session first. Okay. This is going to, there's not going to be a Secrets of Role Manging since this is the last one. It doesn't matter. So we'll just do that both in one. I predict this being a quite long episode. The timer below my face will probably prove that. Alright, so they started this session on March 19th, 1925, which was a Thursday. And remember, we had Neptune Jones in prison, Jerry Fisk in basically critical condition, and the other three were at the hotel. Reefley couldn't make this session, so Jerry was just, he's in critical condition. He's not going to make the trip. Okay, and so they decided, well, we've got work to do. You know, we're on a time schedule, we got things to do, so we got to do it without Neptune, I guess, or Jerry. So they immediately headed out, and they went to the Nairobi Star, which was the newspaper. And so there they met with a woman, the publisher, Natalie Smith Forbes, kinder older lady. And they were asking about the Carlisle exhibition and any back files that they might have, and she showed them, so that they got some info from that. And they got some info from Mrs. Smith Forbes herself. So they found out a bunch of names. They found out of a guy named Sam Mariga, who supposedly found the massacre site initially. They found out that a man named Tandor Singh occasionally met with Sir Aubrey Penhew when he was around. They found out that Hypatia was apparently pregnant when she was in town. They found out a few other names, but they never followed up on them, so it doesn't matter. The names wouldn't have really been... Like, literally, they were... Well, I didn't expect this session to be the last one. They were incredibly productive throughout this whole session. It was amazing. I was like, yeah, okay. So they got all their info quickly from the Nairobi Star. And they then met up with Golk at the hotel. And so they told him about, you know, the shit that went down. And he's like, okay, I'll go check out the prison, see if I can, you know, expedite things. And it's just like, I love that with Golk. Because it's like, you know, in a normal thing, you're like, okay, what would he say? You know, maybe he has to do some rolls and try and figure this out. But no, Golk is just the DM's hand of God. Make things happen exactly as I want them. Golk is such a great character. Throw him in all your campaigns. In either the fun, traditional bag Golk or the fuck you, Nyarlathotep, Loki, godlike version. Both are just great. Anyways. So, they tried then to meet up with Nails Nelson. And so, I wanted to make this pretty easy on them, because really, Nails Nelson has no real purpose at this point. Because his purpose here is to link events much further along in the campaign. And so I was like, all right, you know, you reckon he'd be probably at this pub. But they go to this pub at like 9 in the morning, or 10 in the morning. There's nobody there. The bartender's just like, you know, and he's setting things up like that and whatever. They're just like, well, we'll have to come back later. So a couple of them, they go to the hotel just to relax. Delawaru decides he needs to get shit done. So he goes into Blacktown to look for Sam Mariga. And he ends up finding him because Sam Mariga is really easy to find. He literally has like the nicest exterior home in all of Blacktown. Like, it's the only home that's just covered in beautiful flowers. So you're going to notice it. So he bumps into Sam Mariga. They chat. You know, they are brothers of Africa and all that. They get along fine. And Sam Mariga is a pretty important character to get along fine with, because he agrees to lead the group to the Mountain of the Black Wind. After Delawaru pretty much explains everything that's going on, he's like, yes, I must lead you there. And so then he also tells them to go find Kenyatta, who they already kind of knew about, but they needed some help finding him. So Kenyatta, Johnstone Kenyatta, is at the Kikuyu Central Association. So the KCA, there he is. Go talk to him. He will assist you. So they all get together. And it's unfortunate Neptune kind of missed all this. But I feel like maybe it was so productive because Neptune wasn't there. I don't know. He may have just got, in a big brawl or something again. But anyways, so they all go to the KCA. They meet with Kenyatta, who's a good guy. And they tell him basically the same whole story. And he's like, I don't... I don't understand most of what you speak, and I don't believe much of it either. But there is a man that may assist you. And he's like, do you agree to meet him? And he didn't really say who he was or how he would assist him or anything like that. He's just, do you agree to meet him? And they're like, yeah, I guess, because how are you gonna refuse that? And so he leaves. He comes back, and he's like, there will be a man at the door. Follow him, he will lead you. Go where he goes. And they're like, okay. They all shake hands, and then they see this guy, and they follow him through the town. He leads them into a little wooden shed. Like, this is very rapey, I know. He leads them into a wooden shed. They go in, and there is a Rolls Royce there. And so he gestures them to go in. They go in, and he drives them outside of the town. Through through Kenya, through winding paths and all sorts of stuff. And they go to this little village, Boidovu. And there he speaks with this man in front of a hut. And he gestures them to get out of the car and speak with this man, and he will wait. So they go up to this guy, Okomu. And Okomu is just an asshole. I don't think I portrayed him as enough of an asshole. But really, he protects this guy that they want to meet with. And they need to convince him to let them see him. And so Delawaru just kind of... Like, it helped that Delawaru was himself, from Kenya. That makes things a lot easier. And he pretty much just was like, the Mountain of the Black Wind, and we must go, and we must stop great evil. And I had him roll rapport, and he did. And I was like, well, that's pretty much it. There's no real reason for this guy to be an asshole anymore. This is important shit, clearly. So he's just like, yes, I understand what you must speak with old Bandari. So they go in this little hut, and there is this old decrepit man just kind of sitting there with his eyes closed. He looks like he's dead. And the guy's like, you must sit here and wait for him to come into our reality. You must not move, you must not speak. You must wait. And they were like, all right, we'll wait. And so he leaves, and I'm like, how long are you guys going to wait? And Delaware was just like, until I pass out. And I'm like, all right. And so the others were like, yeah, I guess until something happens. And it's just, it's so easy to say in just a role-playing game. It's just like, yeah, whatever. But it's like in a video game. Like, yeah, even in a video game, it's just like, you have to sit here for 9 hours. Now, of course, you can just leave it and go do it. So a video game still isn't the greatest example. But, man, can you imagine in real life sitting there for 9 hours? Not moving, not talking, just... Like, I feel like, damn, man. But it's so easy in just a role-playing game. Just be like, yeah, 9 hours pass. Yeah, you guys, it's excruciatingly boring. You're about to go insane, but yeah, 9 hours passed. But I'm not sure if I could do that in real life. So, but yeah, so 9 hours pass, and the guy finally wakes up, and he speaks Kikuyu, and he looks at Delawaru, and he's like, "I know that you seek your family." And he looks at Holly, and he's like, "I know this one has had a adventurous past." And he looks at Hikaru. He's like, "I know this one has brought dishonor on himself." And so then Okomu comes in and starts translating for the rest of them. And basically, old Bandari should be more helpful than he really is. But he's just like, he basically tells them what they already know. Like, shit's about to go down, you need to get there. Like, there's not anything really new there. Like, if he gave specifics, it'd be much more helpful than just, shit's about to go down, you know? I guess I could have given specifics. They did name the priestess as Moweru, but I guess he didn't really emphasize how powerful she was. I don't know how much you're supposed to really give away in that conversation. But then he gives them gifts. He's like, "I have gifts for you." And so he gives them basically a old school African fly swatter called a fly whisk. And but it's magical. So it finds and resists evil. Really, it doesn't do much. Like, I think it's just kind of a joke. I feel like it's really a joke. Because Delawaru, from the moment he got it, he carried this with him at all times. And whenever something scary would happen, he'd just be like waving it around. And I just feel like I can just picture it in my head, and it's funny to me. So I feel like it's a joke. Like a cosmic joke. Somebody's laughing. Probably Gulk. Maybe Gulk set this all up. I don't know. And then the other gift is a little chameleon in a cage. And he's just like, take care of this, feed it daily, and when you are in danger, it will protect you, but not from magic. And it is named who is not what she seems, but you may call her Who. And that's pretty much it. They left. That was it for Old Bandari. Now you can convince Old Bandari and Okomu to go with you. They know where the Mountain of the Black Wind is as well. So, if you really want, you could have that happen. Okomu does not fight. He doesn't do anything like that. He's not a fighter. His only job is just... He's basically like shitty Secret Service. So he will just basically like go like this over Old Bandari and protect him from any, things trying to kill him. But he won't actually fend them off. He'll just sacrifice himself. So he's pretty shitty. Old Bandari knows magic, but it's not really good magic. It's not the magic you want. It's like tribal magic. Like, if you want it to rain tomorrow night, this guy might be the one you go to. If you want to speak with a snake, this guy might help you out. He knows Earthly Serenity. This spell deadens the recipient to even the most intense pain for a period of 1 hour. It can also be used to bring an insane person to calm sanity for the same hour only. So it's just like a band-aid, basically. And even then, I feel like it could screw you. Because it's just like, oh, your broken leg, it's in excruciating pain. Here, I'll cast this spell. There, you're not in pain at all. Go, run! And it's just like, yeah, that'll work. Like, so, yeah, I wouldn't want Old Bandari with me, but... Yeah, so pretty much after that, they pretty much went to bed. They went back to town, they went to bed. Okay, so in the morning, they went to Tandor Singh's place, his tea shop, which is in town. And so I'm like, alright, this is going to happen. I mean, I know they're going to kill Tandor Singh at some point, or they're going to, confront him, but he's going to be able to escape, and he's going to flee Nairobi. One of the two. But one of those is inevitable. So they get there, they go in, they look around, they see this guy. Oh, they were tailed at some point. I feel like in another world I could have pulled this bullshit at any point. Because, like, I think when they were going to... Yeah, when they were going to Kenyatta's, the association, I had Hikaru roll a notice. I just picked him at random, I guess. And he rolled well enough. He rolled like a 4. So I was like, you see a man who appears to be following you. You can't really confirm, but it seems like it. And he's not black. He seems Indian. And so you tell that to your players, and they're just like, okay, this man is following us. He's a cultist. He's got to die. That's it. No question about it. There's no question about it. There's no other alternative. There's no world in which this guy just happens to be walking on the street and you think he's following you because you're kind of paranoid. It's impossible. And I feel like that's such a wasted opportunity for me. I should have done that at some point in this campaign. I should have just had them murder some guy in cold blood just because they thought he was following them. And I was kind of... I kind of teased that a little bit, but we all know that this guy is an evil cultist trying to kill him, so... they were right. But, yeah, that's a great thing to pull at some point. That would be beautiful. Like, they just break into this guy's house one night, they just gut him completely, they slaughter him, and then they search his house and they just find nothing. They find like a picture of his family and he collects model trains or some shit. They'd still probably believe he's a cultist. They wouldn't care. Alright, yeah, so they go into a shop, they basically just buy some tea, and Hikaru confirms that this is the guy that was following them, and they walk out. And so he's like, that's the guy that was following us. And so they're like, okay, what do we do? Oh, well, we got to kill him. And so Hikaru's like, I'm going to confront him. So he walks back in, and he's like, you were following us. And the guy's like, I don't know what you're talking about. You say, you stop lying, you are following us. Like, sir, you must be mistaken. Like, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. But, sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave my shop. It's like, fine. And he leaves. I'm just like, okay. So, that night, they want to ambush him. Like, as soon as he leaves his shop, they want to jump him. Because he refuses to break into the shop at all. That's dishonorable. Ed, for this character, has a very strange sense of dishonor. But to break into this guy's house, that's way too far. That's wrong. But to slaughter him in the street, it's all good. So they wait for him to walk out. And Ed literally is just like standing in the street in plain sight. So the guy was going to go leave. He was going to go eat dinner. But he just looks out his window and sees this guy, this Asian dude with a sword standing in the street. So he just locks the front door and changes the sign to close, and then he just stays there. And so they're just like, damn, we've been defeated. No, he hasn't been defeated yet. So Hikaru picks up pebbles and starts throwing them at the guy's window upstairs. Like he's a freaking teenage boy. So I'm just like, yeah, a patrol of policemen come by and ask you what the hell you're doing. And Ed's like, I need to speak with this man. And the cops are like, it sounds like a stalker, right? He's just at night throwing pebbles at the guy's window. And so they're just like, this man clearly does not want to speak with you. It's like, no, I really need to talk to him. They're just like, piss off. Like, they're getting ready to just beat this guy's ass. So they all just wander off. They're like, in the morning, we'll take care of it. So they go to bed. And I'm just like, alright, at this point, Tandor Singh, yeah, he's not going to put up with this shit. So he didn't want to do this. He did not want to have to do this, but these people are clearly onto him, they're gonna try and kill him. So he's got to make the first move. So that night, they're sleeping at the hotel, and Hikaru gets woken up because his room seems much more bright than it used to be. And he looks out the window and he sees a floating ball of gas coming towards him. And, yeah, so since this is the last thing, I can say this now. For anybody that was in the campaign, that is watching, that really cares, those are not deadlights. The deadlights are not in this at all. They're not. These are fire vampires, a classic Cthulhu, Call of Cthulhu enemy. Servants of Cthulhu, which is Cthulhu's sister? No, that can't be right. I think I might just be making that up. Cthulhu is his daughter. Cthulhu might be his sister. I don't even remember. Which doesn't, I don't prescribe to that whole thing anyways. But anyways, yeah, they're fire vampires, alright? And so he wakes up Delawaru, who's sleeping in the same room, and they're just like, oh shit, look at that thing. And so they run out, they wake Holly up, she's like, oh shit. And so they did like a whole bunch of debating about like they wanted to spend fate points to make like a swimming pool appear. And I'm just like, no. That's not how fate points, like that's a big detail. Fate points are for, for story details is stuff like I knew this guy, or I've met this guy before, or something like that, or fate points have to be, story details from fate points have to be kind of related to an aspect. I know I changed that, I fucked that up with the raining thing, but that was the first time I really run fate. But everything kind of has to be related to an aspect. So you can't really just spend, I mean, you can do anything, but proper DMing, you shouldn't just be like, okay, give me a fate point, there's a big swimming pool there. The example from the book, the rule book, for declaring a story detail, is these 3 adventurers, they're captured by this like native tribe or something like that, and none of them speak the language. So then one of the guys, like the wizard or whatever, one of his aspects is, if I don't know it, I've read about it. And so he spends a fate point to declare a story detail that he has read about this language enough to speak a little bit of it. That's how it's supposed to be done. It's supposed to be related to aspects. So you can't just, yeah, so that's why I said no. I was like, you can't just, no, there's not a swimming pool there. Because there either is or there isn't. But, yeah, so basically, they didn't try to combat this thing at all. They just all ran out of the building. So, people died. But they got out. And, the whole hotel just went up in flames. Big ball of flames. The nicest hotel in Nairobi. Yeah. And so they're all standing out there, like, catching their breath. And the owner of the hotel, who's very pissed off, rushes over to Delawaru and he's like, You started this fire just like the one on the train! And I did that just to pretty much start some more shit up. I just want to make Nairobi as exciting as possible. And he tried to talk him down, but he quickly incited a mob, and so Delawaru, started getting chased down the street, and Hikaru stuck by him, so he's part of that too. He's getting chased, and Holly was just like, yeah, I don't know them. So nobody was chasing her. So they get chased into Blacktown, and they get... They eventually get away from the crowd. They hide. And Holly checks into another hotel. And I guess Hikaru checks into another... Like, he met up with her at some... Yeah, it doesn't matter. So they're in a hotel. Delawaru goes to stay with Sam for the time. Alright, so then it's March 21st, 1925. I don't know if I ever said. No, I don't think I did. So yeah, Golk went to the prison, and he came back, and he's like, yeah, so the best I could do is, he's not going to be hung, but they'll let him out in 4 days. And so I picked that number very specifically, as you'll come to find out. So Golk basically engineered that. Alright, so March 21st, Haruka and Holly get up. Holly eats breakfast. Haruka just goes straight out. He goes straight to Tandor Singh's, and he's like, I'm just going to stand there and wait for him to open. And I'm just like, you're just standing in front of the door. He's like, yeah. I'm like, he can freaking see you. Why would he just let you in? You're clearly like a psychopath. You know that he clearly wants you dead. Why would he just let you into his building? So no, he keeps the door locked. And so finally Haruka's like, alright, screw it. So he kicks the door in. And Tandor is like, what is the meaning of this? And he like slashes him across the arm. And so then Tandor starts casting a spell. What he was casting was Strike Blind, which is a custom spell from Masks. I can actually read it to you if you want. Well, you don't actually get much say in the matter, so I guess I'll read it to you. Alright, Strike Blind. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so he or she loses 1d10 sanity points and 1d4 hit points. The eyes suddenly melt and flow from their sockets as the target is horribly blinded. The target is unable to do anything other than react to the overwhelming pain. Holy shit. How is it only 1d4 hit point? Well, I guess. It wouldn't kill you, I suppose. Yeah, I suppose that kind of makes sense. And then, you know, you're blind. So, that's called through. I had to reword it a bit for Fate. So, yeah, I think I did some, like, I'm not sure if I did mental stress. I think I did. But then also, you gain the aspect of just painfully blinded. And then that's it. You're blind. There's no way to reverse it. Well, you know, Golk aside. But otherwise, you're blind. So that's just a permanent aspect you got. So yeah, he was trying to cast that, but it takes 2 rounds to cast. So he started muttering some words. Because if it was instant, it'd be a little OP, I guess. But, yeah, so 2 rounds, so he starts muttering it, and so Haruka slashes again, and he strikes very well. And he basically just slashes him across the throat, and then he decapitates him afterwards. So, yeah, Tandor Singh is dead. And, then he strips down to his underwear. He closes the door to the shop, but he doesn't lock it. He specifically, you have to say, I lock it. You can't just say, I close the door. Especially when you kicked it open. And so he's like, I was like, you hear the front door open. And he's like, but I locked it. I'm like, no. You have to say that shit. I'm sorry, that's how shit works. Especially since you kicked it open. So that all wasn't really working how it should have. You would have had to pay special attention. He didn't. The door's opening, so he just books it out the side door. He like kicks the side door open, and he hears a scream, a woman scream from behind him, and he is just running down the street of Nairobi. He's the only Asian man in town, and he is almost naked. Okay, so what followed was like a citywide manhunt, basically, for this one Asian man. And he went to the shack where the Rolls Royce was. And Delawaru just kind of hung out at Sam Mariga's. And they did check his house. And Delawaru was initially going to try to be sneaky, but then he's like, you know, they're probably not looking for me, and it would be tough to get an exact description. So I think he like took off his ceremonial stuff and just pretended to be like cooking for Sam or something. So Yeah, nothing really happened there. That was good, because if he tried to be sneaky and failed, then they would assume something's up. So that was good. So, okay, so what followed was very interesting. So, we were kind of doing that, the Delawaru stuff for a little bit. And then I go to Ed, who was hiding in the shack. And he was hiding in the corner of the shack with the cover of the Rolls Royce, like, over him. And I'm like, okay, Ed, the door to the shack gets kicked in. And he's like, wait! And I'm like, what? You know, like, I know he's just going to try and clarify some shit. And so I think there's where he clarified that he hid his swords, he shaved his head, and he was hiding in the corner with the cover. I was like, okay. So he hears like these men talking in Swahili, and I had him roll his stealth. And he rolled really shittily. So I was like, alright, so the men, you hear the men's footsteps coming over to you, and they yank the cover off, and one of the men pulls out a revolver and points it at you. And he said, this is what Ed says, I swear to God. I punch him in the throat. And so I had to paint the scene for him. I was like, okay. Like, literally, he's in the corner, on the ground, like this, you know? Like, he was hiding, like this. On the ground. A couple men come in, yank the cover off of him, and quickly go like this, and point it at him. Like pointing down at him. And he says, I punch him in the throat. And I'm just like, no, not even Jet Li could pull that off. Like, you'd have to stand up to reach him. He's gonna shoot you. Like, maybe if he said I kick the gun out of his hand or something like that, like, alright, that's a start. But just, I punch him in the throat. Like, how long do you think your arms are, Richard Reed? But anyways. So he's like, so I explained that to him, and he's like, yeah, you're right. I'll just stand up. And I'm like, okay. One of the men wants to put handcuffs on you. He's like, okay. And they're going to lead you to jail. He's like, you know, can I just say that I, like, committed seppuku during the night? And I was like, no, you went along with this. Or no, he said some shit. No, he said some shit about how he buried his swords. And I was like, you did not say that. You said you hid them. Hiding them and burying them are two different things. Clarification, man. It's kind of important. This is just another step of the, I closed the door. So, yeah, I was like, no, you didn't bury them. They're sitting in the car. He's like, fine, can we just say I committed seppuku then last night? And I'm like, yeah, I guess. It's like, because that this has gone on too far, I guess. I'm just like, okay. And then I was like, wait, it's the same day. You killed this guy this morning. And he's like, what, wait, what? I thought a whole night passed. Oh, hold on then. Well, I would have just, like, cut them in half as soon as they walked into the room. And I'm like, no. And so I was like, all this retconning and all this kind of shit that's going on. I was like, what do you guys think? And so I think they decided, just roll one fate dice. One fudge dice. So it's either a plus, a 0, or a minus. I didn't really know what I would have done if it was a 0. But he rolled a minus, and I was like, yeah, you committed honorable Sudoku during the night. Or as soon as you arrived in the shed, you're just like, I can't stand it. So yeah, that was it. He died. And so news kind of spread about the Asian man that killed a man and then killed himself in a shed. And So after that, everybody else was kind of just lying low. So March 22nd, nothing happened. Absolutely nothing. March 23rd, Neptune got released. And so, on March 22nd, the only thing that happened on the 22nd was Sam Mariga and Delawaru were talking. And Sam was like, "You must make a decision about our trip, Delawaru. To get to the mountain, there are 2 routes we can take. One is across the open plains through, what the hell was the name of it? Thika. Yeah, across the open plains through Thika. And we would get there in about 5 days. The other route is uses the slopes and trees of the Aberdar forest as cover. But that would take around 8 days. So one is much safer from prying eyes." And so Delaware did the math, because they head out on the 23rd, so the fast route would get there on the 28th. Slow route would get there on the 31st, which is the day of the birth. And so Delawaru, this was all in Delawaru's hands. This was kind of a big thing. And he's like, well, the slower route is not an option, because we cannot arrive, we cannot risk it. I was like, wow, okay. I'm not sure if everybody in the group would have made that decision. But, so we must take the faster route. And Sam's like, well, then I hope that prying eyes are kind to us. Alright, so the 23rd, Neptune gets released. They all gather up, and they head out. They begin their hike. They quickly catch up Neptune on all the details about what happened, and their hike begins. And they decide that, so they're like, Ed, we got to get you in on this. This is a big deal. You got to have a character. So he quickly whips up a character, very quickly. Like, he didn't have skills at the point when I think his character came in, and his name was John Doe. So his name was John Doe throughout the session. And so, like, he literally just, like, tagged along. Like, he was just some white guy that just followed them out into the... Like, it was so ridiculous. We're just like, okay, fine, he's there, Alright, so the hike goes on. So the 24th... Or the 23rd, the 24th, 25th, Yeah. Yeah, the 23rd, 24th, 25th, they're hiking through the plains of Africa. And, so I'm describing to them how kind of beautiful and lush the scenery is, and I'm like, Delaware, this is what you need to save. This is, this is Africa as you know it, and it is at risk now. Really building up how, beautiful it is. And on the 26th, they arrive in Ndovu village, which is just a small little place. It's like a home base, basically. It's kind of very much in the hands of the Bloody Tongue, so they didn't want to talk about any of their true purpose and stuff like that. They're just passing through. And in a more relaxed timeline, or not in game, but out of, like, just... Because I basically knew that this was nearing the end of everything. But if I was just planning on going all the way, I probably would have had, like, an ambush or something at this point. Like, they stay the night at Ndovu and the Bloody Tongue try and kill them. Something like that. It would be a very clear point for an ambush. But since I was like, okay, we can do this. Let's just keep going. So they pass right through Ndovu. And then on the night of the 27th, Friday, they're sitting around their camp, and they start, I think they were like sleeping, but they're woken by the sounds of wings flapping in the distance. And so they all get up, they get all alert. Delawaru like summons a lion to protect them, and he's waving his fly whisk around, and this creature swoops in out of nowhere, black as night, and devours up one of the African guys that they brought with and just chews on him as he flies through the sky. And they're like, holy shit. And then they roll their wills and they take some mental stress and shit like that. And so this is a hunting horror, which is kind of... they could have encountered these at any point along the campaign. Like, almost any of their villains could summon hunting horrors, and I never used one, and I was like, alright, I gotta use one at some point. This is the time. So, Maweru sent a hunting horror to kill him. And so, the other day, I went through this whole section, and I basically converted all the important pieces to Fate, you know, in advance. So, I converted the hunting horror to Fate, and he's kind of beastly. He's beastly in Call of Cthulhu, but yeah, I made him pretty tough. And so, like, he's black as night, like, he's completely dark. And he's like 40 feet long, he's got like tough hide, so they really have to hurt him. And he can just swoop in and just devour him and grab him and all sorts of shit. And so, they were in a rough spot. But they were like, you know, we must open the cage. Like, this is the time. And I was like, yeah, this really is the time. And so, sure enough, they open the cage, and who is not what she seems quickly expands to the size of a full-grown elephant. And I was just like, this is basically like a big fly. So this is no problem. So it just like lashes out its tongue at the thing, wraps around its neck, pulls it in, and just devours it. And I was like, yeah, that's sweet. And, you know, was it the right time to use it? At the time, it seemed like, oh, that's perfect. In the long run, maybe not. It depends on, I guess, if they could have handled this without the chameleon. It's possible. They would have had to have been creative. If they just sat there and just were like, boo, 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 probably not. That is Call of Cthulhu style. That is what I picture them doing in Call of Cthulhu. Is just, oh, keep firing. Psh, 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 psh. That is not Fate style. And I still think at this point they're not quite thinking in Fate style. They'll get there, but creativity is so important in Fate, as they'll come to learn. But yeah, the giant chameleon just devoured it, and then it disappeared. And they're like, oh. And so, yeah, so at this point, Ed had developed his character, finally, John Doe. And so his character's trouble was talks too much. Because we were talking about how all of his other characters don't talk much. So this character talked incessantly, and it was very annoying. So I guess he nailed it. And so, yeah, they slept through the night. So then it's March 28th, Saturday. Good day to die. And Sam's like, we will arrive at the mountain by mid-afternoon. And so it's during like that whole beginning of that day, I was just describing like how they've gone from just beautiful Africa to nightmare Africa. Like at the start they were like looking out at the animals like grazing and galloping through the long grass and stuff like that. Now they don't encounter any animals. Like the grass just kind of like fades away to just nothingness and dirt and shit. And insects are just like floating through the air and swirling patterns and shit, like kind of like True Detective. Like at one point, like Rust, like, you know, he like hallucinates. I think it's like birds or something like swirling around in the air. It was basically like that. And like the mountain is just looming ahead of you with this dark menace, and it just, this is not right. Like everything in your head tells you to not go towards this place. You really got to build up this mountain as just the worst. And I think I did okay with that. Yeah, you could of course done. I could have written out like a whole paragraph ahead of time or something. But yeah, so they finally approach the mountain, and they stop at the edge of it. And Sam's like, "This is as far as I go. May the gods of Africa be with you." And he's like, you know, we will await till tomorrow morning. If you have not returned, then we will assume the worst. And Ed's character is like, well, that's harsh, man. What if we just get like lost? And Sam's like, we are already lost. Like, it was so perfectly dark and grim. Like, yeah. Alright, so they started heading up. And there's this sheer cliff face, you know, they're on this, like, narrow ledge and shit. And if you want to be a dick, you could have them roll to see if they, like, you know, break off a piece of the ledge and almost fall or stuff like that. You can make it as exciting as you want, but time was running a bit short, so I really wanted to get to this big climax. Because I was like, I didn't want to end it off, like, when they're about to get there, and just the next session is just, okay, here we are, you know, it had to end. Okay, so they climb up, they find, like, a secret entrance into a cavern, and they, so they enter into what is actually Moweru's personal cavern, and here they find a bunch of bone piles and a giant statue of the god of the bloody tongue, and so they lose some sanity from that, and then they see a hanging cage. Like a giant hanging cage. And inside are just dozens of men, women, and children. And these men, women, and children are alive. They are prisoners meant to be sacrifices. I don't think I explained that well enough. Because I was like, Delawaru, you see your family. And he immediately interpreted him as the bodies of his family hanging in this cage. And everybody else jumped right on that. Like, oh man, that is effed up. And Ziggy's just like, Delawaru just like breaks down. He's just, and I was just like, oh, they think they're dead. And so I cost him like one mental stress just for seeing his family caged. But if I had known he thought they were dead, that would have been like, shit, man. That's like a forced consequence or something like that. Like, that's a big deal. So yeah, that was misinterpretation, I think. They were supposed to be alive, and he was gonna like, he was supposed to like let them out, and then they would be like a burden on him for this final consequence or final. I guess he would have sent them out or something, but it doesn't matter. I guess it was fine because it was just another step of just desolation and horror. I should have just had them be dead, but yeah. Anyways, so yeah, they just leave them, and Delawaru kind of just sits there in silence for a few minutes, but they find a secret. What appears to be like a secret wall. And so Neptune Jones is like looking for a mechanism to open this. And so I'm like, alright, just roll like 4 fudge dice. Because it's supposed to be a luck roll in Call of Cthulhu. So I just did it as, you know, 4 fudge dice. If you roll like a 1 or higher, boom, you find it. He rolls a -3. Which is uncommon. And so I'm like, oh. And he's like, oh man, I triggered the trap. And I'm like, no, there's nothing like that. And he's like, no, I rolled badly. Give me what you got. And I'm like, all right, if you insist. And so I'm like, okay, your hand finds the mechanism, and you activate it, but your hand gets like crushed by it. The wall slides open, but your hand just gets crushed by this mechanism. And so he took like 2 physical stress. And I was like, you know, you asked for it. But the door's open, so he kind of just wrenches it out. And so so they all go through the wall, the open doorway, and they go into this tunnel. And this tunnel winds around the interior of the mountain. And it's about a mile long. So they're walking through this tunnel for like half an hour. Finally, they get up to another wall, which is apparently similar to the one they were at. And so Neptune is like, somebody else try to open this one. So Delawaru steps up. And I'm like, alright, roll 4 fudge dice. He rolls -3. So I'm like, alright, fine. The same thing happened. The exact same thing. So his hand gets crushed. But instead of taking the 2 physical stress, he tries to take he wants to take the consequence. So he takes a mild consequence of crushed hand. And healing is a strange thing. I mean, you can do healing however you want in Fate, but HP is kind of a strange thing, you know. So normally stress goes away at the end of every scene. So healing in the middle of a scene, like if you want to heal stress in the middle of a scene, I'm not really sure how that's intended to work. I think if you took if there were potions, like you're doing a fantasy game and you have potions, I think that could heal physical stress in the middle of a fight or something. Like you could swig a potion in the middle of a fight to uncheck one box or something like that. But consequences are different because consequences are supposed to be lasting. But mild consequences go away at the end of a scene, I think. And then moderate go at the end of a session, or it takes a whole session to heal. And severe take a whole scenario, which is a whole arc. That's a big deal. But you need to start the recovery process, I guess. So, for a broken leg, you would need to get it, in a cast, or something in a splint, or something like that. Some indication that you've trying to heal it. You can't just walk around with a broken leg, So, for Delawaru, he wanted, herbal, African healing or something like that. And so, regular healing for this, it would have been science, but I was like, okay, you can use your will instead. But he wanted... Okay, this is kind of a length. I don't know why I'm going into this. But, so, when Neptune got injured, he's like, oh, can you patch me up? I was like, no, your healing really only works for, consequences. It doesn't heal physical stress or anything like that. He's like, oh, okay. And so then Delawaru wanted to get the loophole. So he's like, oh, I'll take the consequence instead of the stress. I was like, okay. And he's like, oh, I want to heal it. And I was like, it really only starts the recovery process. But for a mild one, it's at the end of a scene. So really, maybe I should have just let him roll it. But it's you just crushed your hand. How would you patch that up quickly? I don't know. You know what? I don't know. That's a complicated thing you're going to have to just work out. So yeah, whatever. So the door swings open and they go into this bigger cavern. This one's the size of a football field. It's really big. And I described the whole thing to him, the big columns and the big altar, and how it's just, this cavern, this thing just does not feel right. You feel at unease just being here. And then finally I hit the last thing, which is this dais. And on this raised platform is the body of Hypatia Masters. But, it's her little female head, just kind of normal head. And then her body is just engorged out. Picture the fattest person in the world. It's more bulbous than that. This is just horrific. And it goes into detail about how describing it. And they all have to roll sanity. And this one is pretty big. So a couple of them had to take consequences. And so I think a couple of them had to take minor frightened consequences. And so they're like, oh shit. And so they're like, well, we gotta kill this. So they eventually all make their way up to the platform. And they're like, we gotta shoot her. And so they all get up there, except for Delawaru. He doesn't have a gun, but I think he's up there. And so they got three pistols basically, pointed at this horrible, messed up woman. A couple of them are pointed at her belly, and I think Neptunus has it right at her temple. And I made a point of specifically asking them where the guns are pointed, but I couldn't say why it was important. They were just like, what does it matter? We're just pointing at her. But I was like, just, tell me. But since Neptune made a specific point, he's like, it's at her temple. I was like, okay. And so he did a countdown. He's like, 5, 4, 3, 2, and then I was like, okay, you hear a shout from behind. He says, stop! He's like, 1. Completely ignores. I'm like, all right, roll your shoot. So they all roll. And I was like, okay. I'm going to do a roll that's very important, but I'm going to do it out in public. So I did a public roll, and I was like, it needs to be under 50. And I rolled like a 29. I was like, okay. So Hypatia's body just basically explodes. And so you're all covered in just like this orange vomit. And I described like the spawn that was inside and how terribly disgusting it is and stuff like that. There probably should have been another stress thing or sanity thing, but I was like, I know how fucked these guys are anyways. It doesn't matter. And so they're all like, yeah, we killed it, yeah. But then they remembered this shit that's going on behind them. So they turn around and they just see this African woman and 10 of the burliest black men they've ever seen charging and roaring towards them. And so they, I think one of them shoots right away and like clips her arm. And then she gets to the altar and stops. She places her hand on it. And then she mutters some words and thrusts her hand towards Delawaru. Basically, she cast Fist of Yogg-Sothoth. And in the book, when the altar itself contains 300 magic points, of which anybody that's touching it can utilize. So, if she were to expend the whole thing on this one Fist of Yogg-Sothoth, she wouldn't, but it would be funny. Basically, Delawaru would get rocketed through the mountain and probably end up in, like, Australia. It would be immense. But that's in Call of Cthulhu, so I couldn't, there's no magic points for my conversion to Fate. So it's just like, Will is going to be used for casting spells, so I'll just say, I gave her a stunt that was like unlimited power. And I was like, as long as she is touching the altar, her will is a +8 for the purpose of casting spells. And it seems I'm at 4 minutes, so I'm really going to have to sum this up. Okay, so basically, yeah, Delawaru just gets rocked. He takes, like, the broken body consequence, and the bodyguards are making pretty quick work of the crew, because I made them pretty beastly, because they're pretty beastly in the book. So they're getting kind of shredded apart. They kind of realize that they're done for the most part. And so Delawaru spends his last fate point to declare the story detail that Jerry Fisk appears, briefly, because he had apparently gotten off work and he showed up on the roll 20, and I was like, you know what, fine, because I could picture it in my head. So Jerry shows up and like pops one of the guards in the back of the head, and he's like, yeah. And so then Moeru immediately turns around and just dominates him and just takes over his mind. But so I was just like, yeah, he's done. But then they finally kill Moeru in this awesome little move. I think Neptune killed her. It was very cool. And so it was all very epic, but they were getting their asses handed to us. But they did kill Moeru, and so basically Jerry and Holly tried to escape. So they're running down, and they're gonna die because these guys are in peak physical condition, and they are more pissed off than they've ever been. So it's not looking good. So Holly pulls out this crazy stunt that she apparently picked, where it was just like something happens when you're about to be taken out. When you're about to die, and you do this awesome thing, and I was like, you know what, fine, okay. And so she pulled out like a hand grenade and just blew up the mountain, but apparently she survived. I don't know how that works. But Jerry took the stunt of sprinter, so that's all he's about, is just sprinting as fast as he can. So he did like an athletics roll as the mountain is crumbling behind him, and he finally sprints out, and he survives. And I was just like, well, you guys have just beaten Masks of Nyarlathotep. Congratulations. Yeah, so they were happy about the ending. I mean, they were kind of sad that it was over because it's been a great campaign, but it was a good point to end because it is a proper ending. Like, you kill the spawn of Nyarlathotep, the enemies can't win. It's kind of essential to their plans. I mean, you could say Nyarlathotep goes and makes another spawn, and it works out, and they just do it again. But you could also say Nyarlathotep just destroys the planet. So, it doesn't really matter. Golk was pleased with this exciting little ending, as I was pleased. And he was like, all right, that's it for a little while, for a week, I don't know. I ended because I wanted to end on a high note at a kind of, it was an ending point, and I didn't want to go on to where I got burned out and we had to end at a point where it wasn't a good ending point. So, I could have gone into the Shanghai chapter or something like that, but really any three of the ending points are perfectly valid, and this one I feel like is the most proper because it's in Kenya, it's the spawn of Nyarlathotep, it's really big deal, it's really climactic, so it was good. I hate that I have to rush this ending, but it was a great campaign. I really enjoyed it. I loved all the secret stuff. It was really fun. This is probably the best campaign I'll ever DM. I don't think I'll top it. So I'm glad we could end on a high note. I'm glad everybody could enjoy it, but I am looking to play some Fate myself now. I got to get in on this action. So a lot of good times were had. A lot of fun characters. So comment on what you think, thought of the whole thing, and I'll see you fine folks around.